So this morning, just wanted to reflect a little bit on Dan's presentation yesterday, and spend a little bit more time talking about strength spotting. We heard a lot of really positive and engaging information from Dan Tomasulu yesterday, and he particularly focused on changing our perspective and the importance of what we pay attention to. He had a quote which is really stuck with me. I knew it from before, but he reminded me of it. A quote from William James, that my experience is what I agree to attend to. So what we pay attention to is extremely important in how we perceive others, and how others are perceived. I found another quote about attention by Alexandra Horowitz, who was a neuroscience person, who said, "Attention asks what is relevant right now and gears us up to notice only that." And I think that's what Dan left with me yesterday, was just that we want to pay attention to people's strengths and what's positive, not only for the present moment, because it also influences the future in terms of how we see folks. So I know he shared this yesterday, just to remind you all that when we talk about strengths, the START programs really embrace the character strengths that are identified through the VIA survey. All of our START teams, all the members of our START teams are required to take the VIA character strength survey, which then ranks your strengths and identifies your top strengths, that kind of the ones that put you in flow and the ones you use the most. So we do this so that they're able to identify their own strengths, and then able, as Joni said yesterday, then that leads to being able to spot strengths in others. But this morning, I'm just going to share a couple of tips around kind of spotting our own strengths or identifying our own strengths, and then a couple of tips around how we spot those strengths in others as we do our work and working with folks with IDD and mental health issues. So when you think about Dan did an exercise yesterday around thinking about some time when you had like a really mountaintop experience or something that went really well, and thinking about those strengths that you pulled upon. So that's one way to kind of think about what your strengths are. Some other things to think about are to think about things you used to do in childhood that really gave you a lot of enjoyment, things that were easy for you, fun for you, and are there still things that you do today? I think about, for me, I like to swing a lot, and I still do like to swing. But as I think about that now in terms of some of my strengths, and in my top 5, the appreciation of beauty and excellence is always near the top for me. And I think that was part of that as I was growing up, is being outside and being able to appreciate nature. And that has stuck with me. So that appreciation of beauty and excellence is something that still resonates with me. So thinking about the past, and that sometimes can bring up strengths for us. The other things include thinking about what gives you energy, what makes you feel like you, the real you. When you're in that authentic self, chances are you're using your strengths in that way. Things that may come naturally to you. You may excel at them or may not, but things that come kind of naturally, you can naturally engage in certain activities. You're likely using strengths when you're doing those things. And we just talked a lot about attention, but what things really draw your attention? What things are you drawn to? We usually focus on things that really play into our strengths. A couple other things to think about. What things do we learn kind of effortlessly? That's, again, kind of goes along with what comes easy for us. Rapid learning often indicates underlying strengths. Things that motivate you, that you find that you do just for the love of doing them. Nobody has to talk you into it. You're really eager to do those. Those things are likely to pull on your strength. And as you think about these, you can also think about how you can use these, and we'll talk about that in a minute, use these same things in terms of noticing what are strengths in others. Think about and pay attention to your own affect and your own voice. So often when we are talking about something that we are passionate about, that energizes us, our tone of voice changes. and we have more affect, or we're more excited about how we're telling a story, that can also indicate an underlying strength. So listen to yourself. When you say things like, I love to do this, or I feel so great when I do this, those are cues to you about what might be motivating you and putting you in flow. And then think about your to-do list. This is one that I've really paid attention to. So notice the things that you really don't usually have to write down to do, because you do them naturally. They come easily. You don't procrastinate doing them. Those are the things that always seem to get done. So that may reveal an underlying strength of yours, the things we never need to be asked twice to do. And kind of to build on that, the other thing that I've thought about recently and read some things about is thinking about your to-do list and noticing the things that you kind of put off, the things you don't really want to do, and think about what your strengths are and try to kind of shift your perspective of that task so that you bring a strength to that task instead of seeing it as something that is really difficult to you. So in addition to taking the VIA Strength Survey, which I would recommend everyone do, these were just some other tips to think about how we recognize our own strengths in ourselves. And again, as Joni kind of pointed out yesterday, once we do that, it's more easy for us to recognize those strengths in other people that we encounter. So thinking about others, so like I said, all the things that we just reviewed are things that you can kind of shift around and use to identify strengths in others. Here's a few other things. So one is building the language. So I showed you the 24 VIA character strengths, and that really can provide a framework and allows you to prime yourself to see them in others. And so I think that's what happens really when we work with the START teams and have them do the survey, have them identify what their strengths are, and they're asked about their strengths on a daily basis. We really incorporate that into the work we do with the START teams. So having that framework and having those words in a way to identify strengths does allow you to look for them in other people. So create that language for yourself. Be an observant person. Really hone in on your observational skills. And what you can look for are things that are not always verbal or what somebody says, but look for those nonverbal cues. You know, when you're engaging with somebody or talking to someone and they tell you a story and their eyes light up and they're telling you about something they did, you can see that in their affect, in their face. They kind of light up. It doesn't have to be verbal too. You can observe somebody that's engaged in an activity, and you notice a change in their body posture. They're sitting up higher. Their eyes are lighting up. They're smiling. So look at those kind of positive emotions that come out of observing somebody who is engaged in an activity. So simple observation can give us a lot of information about strengths. Listen to folks, and like I just said, we listen to ourselves, but listen to others. And when they have a stronger, more assertive voice or clarity in terms of how they're conveying a message or excited about something, those may be conveying underlying strengths for them. And then importantly, be able to use that language that we've learned to label and explain and to give people feedback. So given the strengths that you spot a name, and really say how you saw that in that person and express appreciation for that person's strengths. And this is something, again, that we work with our teams on. And this applies to the team's interaction with each other as a team, as a START team. This applies to the way folks work with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities that we're working with. It applies to how we work with families. It applies to how we work with the larger system. We are looking for strengths from a broad perspective. So just a couple of examples, you'll be thinking about how that last point about how you label and define. These are just a couple of examples of ways that you could spot strengths in other people. And notice them, name them, and indicate what strength that means for that person. Mary, I noticed that you said kind and helpful words to your classmate. That shows you're kind and loving. I appreciate that about you. So think about, again, create a language for yourself, look at the VIA character strengths, incorporate them into how you interact with folks, and hopefully some of these little tips will be able to help you identify not only strengths in yourself, but strengths in other people. So I encourage you just over the next couple of days to strength spot, or challenge you to strength spot at least 3 people, either people you work with, people in your personal life, over the next couple of days, and think about some of these little tips and cues we gave you, and try to identify strengths in folks, and not just identify them for yourself, but actually name them for them, and give them that feedback. So as we move forward today, we're going to move into, Beth's already done introductions of our speakers, and I'm one of them also. As we move forward, we're going to talk about biopsychosocial assessment. And as we do that, again, keeping in mind what we've learned yesterday and what we're going to talk about today, and how they interact with each other. And as Joni said, we're giving you all the broad overview of the kind of principles that underlie the work that START does. But on an individual basis, on the work we do with teams, we do a lot more specific training for them, and really delve down into these key principles and provide a lot of training and education for the teams. So the START teams, as Joni said, we haven't given you all the details of teams, but the teams are comprised of clinicians, coordinators, medical directors, clinical directors, and they all receive a great deal of training from Center for START services, because we all have noticed, and that's why we're here, we know that there's a gap in the system, a gap in our education system about how we train professionals around people that have IDD and co-occurring mental health needs. And so CSS is trying to fill that gap with really working closely with these teams to create some expertise in systems and to share that among the systems. So again, we're doing a broad overview today, but we will be, as we work with the START teams across the United States, we really delve more deeply into those. And those of you who are living in communities with START teams will also see that evolve within your systems.